Hi, today we're going to be chatting about the cornea. Now, the cornea is an incredibly important topic in ophthalmology, and when we chat about something, it's obviously important for us to decide what exactly we're talking about. So, when we chat about the cornea, what exactly are we talking about? The cornea is a transparent structure, which means it's quite easy to see through. It sits in the anterior part of the eye. In fact, it is one of the most anterior structures of the eye. It consists of 5 distinct layers, which we will chat about a bit later in the lecture. And then, like anything, it's important for us to know the functions of the cornea. Why exactly do we have a cornea? So the major function of the cornea is its power of refraction. It is the main refractor of the eye. Most human corneas have a refractive index in excess of 40 diopters, and this is in comparison to another refractor of the eye, namely the lens, which has a refractive index of about 20 diopters. Another important function of the cornea is that it is a UV light filter, and why that's important is because our eyes are exposed to a lot of light, and excess light and a lot of light, especially UV light, can cause free radical formation, which can be very damaging to our eyes. Okay, so now that we've had a bit of a look at what exactly the cornea is, we're going to discuss the specific layers of the cornea, because it's going to give us a better understanding of how the cornea works and how all these layers come together. So the first layer we're going to chat about is the epithelium. Now, the epithelium is the most external structure, and it consists of 3 different cell types, namely the squamous cells on the outside, the wing cells, which are polyhedral cells, which are in the middle, and then beneath them are the basocolumnar cells. The epithelium is usually 5 to 6 layers thick, but the basocolumnar layer is one cell layer thick. It's usually about 50 micrometers in thickness, the epithelium. And when we talk about the epithelium, it's important that we chat about the idea of the glycocalyx. Now, the glycocalyx is a good way to think about it is, let me just draw it for you here quickly. You can imagine that this is the exterior layer of the epithelium, and these are the cells. Now, these structures are glycoproteins or proteoglycans that extend from these cells and form what is called the glycocalyx. And why it's important is because it forms important structures, important relationships with the tear film, and it helps stabilize the tear film. So tear film stabilization. It's also involved in wound healing. And the way that the glycocalyx is involved in wound healing is through this idea. You can imagine that these are 2 cells, and then we have a defect centrally over here. The way that this wound will heal on the epithelium is that this cell will slide over into this defect and fill this defect, and this is called cell slide, and the way that the cells achieve this is by using the glycocalyx. Okay, now we're going to be chatting about the next layer, which is Bowmans layer. Now, Bowmans layer lies directly below the epithelium. And what's important about Bowmans layer is that it is acellular. It contains no cells whatsoever and is composed predominantly of collagen, types 1 and 5. It also contains proteoglycans and glycoproteins. It's about 8 to 12 micrometers thick, and the function of Bowmans layer is thought to be that of separation. It's thought to separate the epithelial cells, which carry out normal cellular functions, from the cells of the corneal stroma, which have a bit more restricted cellular function, and so there shouldn't be interference from those normal cellular functions. Okay, now we're going to talk about the middle layer of the cornea. And obviously, well, not obviously, but the stroma is the middle layer of the cornea, and it is the thickest layer. It also contains cells called keratocytes, which are very similar to fibroblasts. And why that's important is because they make the major constituent of the stroma, which is collagen. Most stromal collagen is type 1, right? But there are other types, namely type 6, type 5, and type 3. But we only really use type 3 in wound healing. Now, a very, very important thing to understand about the corneal stroma is the whole idea of transparency. Now, corneal transparency and stromal transparency is maintained predominantly through two mechanisms. The first is the way that the stroma is arranged, and the other is relative dehydration through active transport. But we'll chat more about this when we talk about the endothelium. Right now we're just going to focus a little bit on the idea of arrangement of the corneal stroma. The corneal stroma consists of many layers of what we call lamellae. And in the lamellae, all of the collagen fibrils that lie in that lamellae are arranged parallel to each other. The lamellae then lie on top of each other perpendicularly to each other. And what else is important is the idea of the spacing between the collagen fibrils. So you can imagine this is a collagen fibril, this is a collagen fibril, this is a collagen fibril. This spacing continuously remains the same. And what's thought to contribute to this is the specific proteoglycans that exist within our corneal stroma. Okay, so we've looked at the top three layers. Now we're going to move into a little bit deeper to the inner layers of the cornea. So the first layer below the stroma is called descemet's layer. Descemet's. And what it actually is a basement membrane of the endothelium of the cornea. And it is composed predominantly of type 4 collagen. Now, moving on from descemet's layer to the final layer of the cornea is the endothelium. Now, the endothelium is a single layer. It is unable to regenerate, okay, but it is highly metabolically active. And the reason that's true is because it contains many pumps which are involved in transport to keep a relatively dehydrated stroma, which contributes to the transparency of the cornea. Okay, so that's a brief look at the physiology of the cornea. This mind map is available for download. And thanks for listening. I hope you learned something.